The study was swallowed in darkness, save for the cold blue glow of Elise's phone screen casting shadows across my face. My hands trembled beyond control. A message from my father, Harold Carver, stared back at me like a death sentence. Baby, I can't wait any longer. Tonight, not sweetness, not affection. It was a code, a whisper of betrayal. The sound of my glittering world built with sweat and sacrifice crumbling beneath my feet. My chest tightened. The air felt thick, suffocating. I stood there, frozen, a man on the edge of an abyss I hadn't known existed until that moment. I'm Mason Carver. I clawed my way up from a dusty Idaho farm to build Apex Security, a cybersecurity empire shielding the secrets of giants. My life looked perfect from the outside. A sprawling English-style home in Denver suburbs, a wife I thought I knew, Elise, and 3 kids, Jasper, sharp as a tack 11, Sadie, sensitive and quiet at 8, Milo, a whirlwind of 5-year-old energy. That house, that family, they were my proof I'd made it. Every late night, every missed school play, every hour poured into Apex, it was for them. Or so I told myself. Now, that belief felt like a hollow lie. My father, Harold, loomed over my life like a monument. A real estate titan who'd risen from nothing. He was the man I feared and revered, the one whose approval I chased like a dog after a bone. My mother, Beatrice, stood beside him, elegant but distant, her smiles never quite reaching her eyes. Every Sunday, we gathered at their estate, me, Elise, the kids, my brother Theo, my sister Margot, and her husband. Those dinners were supposed to be warm, a ritual of family. But the air always hung heavy. Theo's sly glances at Elise. Margot's forced laughter at my work stories. The way conversations died when I walked in. I brushed it off. Too tired, I thought. Too caught up in my own head. Or maybe something was rotting right under my nose. Before we dive deeper into the storm brewing ahead, let me pause. That unease creeping in, it's real, isn't it? I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Drop it in the comments below. And if you feel the tension tightening like a noose, hit that subscribe button. Stick with me. We're heading into the dark now, back to that fateful night. Harold's diagnosis hit like a thunderbolt. Terminal pancreatic cancer. I felt the ground shift. Pain for losing him mixed with a desperate hope for one last connection, a nod of pride I'd never gotten. Beatrice stayed steely, but her eyes betrayed something, fear, maybe guilt. Theo and Margot played the part of grieving siblings, though their concern rang false to me. Elise stepped up, spending late hours at the Carver estate, claiming she was helping Beatrice cope. I was touched at first, grateful. Then the visits grew too frequent, her excuses too thin. She'd come home distracted, her phone buzzing at odd hours. Doubt took root, a weed choking on my trust. That night, sleepless and haunted by Harold's fading face, I grabbed her phone from the charger in my study. The message burned into my vision. My heart stopped, then pounded with a fury I didn't recognize. A few nights later, I lay still, feigning sleep. Her whispers drifted from the next room. Harold, I'm scared. Mason's been off lately. What if he knows? You have to tell him, or we need another plan. Panic laced her voice, not for me, but for herself, for whatever they were hiding. Disgust coiled in my gut, cold and sharp. Another plan. What did that mean? At work, I tried to hold it together. Vincent Cole, my right-hand man, saw through me. A former intelligence officer, he had a knack for reading people. He leaned in during a meeting, voice low. Mason, you look like hell. Everything okay? I waved him off, muttering about Harold. His steady gaze lingered, unconvinced. Anything you need, I'm here. His loyalty was the only anchor I had left. The world I'd built was cracking from the inside. Every breath tasted of deceit. I stood on a precipice, knowing one more step would plunge me into a truth I couldn't unsee. But I couldn't stop. The pain was already there, festering. It was time to face it. The room smelled of antiseptic and decay, a sterile tomb where my father lay dying. Harold's chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, surrounded by the family I thought I knew. Elise knelt beside him, her fingers tracing his withered hand with a tenderness that made my stomach churn. Too intimate, too wrong. Beatrice stood like a statue, her face a mask of composure I couldn't read. Theo lingered near the door, his eyes darting anywhere but mine. Margot clutched her husband's arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. The silence between us all felt rehearsed, a play I'd stumbled into without a script. Inside, I burned. This wasn't grief. This was a lie wearing a mourning veil. Harold's voice rasped, breaking the stillness. He demanded everyone leave, except me. Elise squeezed his hand one last time, a gesture that lingered too long, then slipped out with the others. Beatrice brushed my shoulder as she passed, her touch cold and hollow. Alone with him, I sat by the bed, my heart pounding with dread and a fragile hope. Maybe he'd say something to mend the rift I'd always felt. Instead, his eyes opened, clear and cruel despite the morphine. Son, I'm not long for this world. There's something you need to know. His tone carried no regret, only a twisted pride that chilled me. He spoke, and each word carved into me like a blade. He'd been with Elise from the start, before I even brought her home as my girlfriend. She married me as a convenience, a way to stay close to him without raising suspicion. She loved my power, Mason. You were just my shadow. The room spun. My father, the man I'd idolized, had stolen my wife and turned my life into a mockery. Then came the worst. Jasper wasn't mine, Theo's son, a quiet insult delivered under my roof. Sadie belonged to Harold, a grotesque trophy of their affair. Milo, the child of Margot's husband, was proof of Elise's reckless contempt. Harold's lips curled as he watched my face, savoring the ruin he'd wrought. He wasn't confessing to unburden his soul. He was claiming victory one last time. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My mind screamed, but my body stayed rooted, numb as his words sank deeper. The monument I'd built for him in my heart collapsed, leaving a pile of jagged rubble. He'd envied me, he said, envied the life I'd earned while he puppeteered it from the shadows. His breathing faltered, and with a final, faint smirk, he slipped away. I stumbled out, past the family's crocodile tears, their rehearsed sobs echoing behind me. They thought I'd break. They didn't know the fire igniting inside me, fueled by betrayal and a hunger for something darker than grief. In the days after the funeral, I returned to his study. The air still carried his scent, whiskey, and arrogance. His tablet sat on the desk, unsecured, a careless habit I'd once found endearing. My hand shook as I powered it on, driven by a need I couldn't name. I hacked in, skills from Apex cutting through his weak defenses. A group chat labeled Carver Legacy waited there, a vault of their filth. Messages stretched back years. Elise to Harold. Mason's working late again. Your place? Beatrice. Use the cabin. He never checks it. Theo, gloating, Jasper's got my eyes. Mason's clueless. They planned every move, siphoning my money, mocking my trust, living their twisted lives on my dime. One message stopped me cold. Beatrice to Harold. Months back, Elise is slipping. Remind her who's in charge, or she'll ruin us all. My mother, the woman who'd taught me right from wrong, had orchestrated this nightmare. The sting doubled, a fresh wound atop the others. I pocketed the tablet, my mind racing. They thought they'd buried their secrets with him. They were wrong. The man I'd been was dying in that room, bleeding out with every revelation. Mason Carver, the dutiful son, the blind husband, was fading. Something else was taking his place, something hard, cold, and unrelenting. The pain didn't break me. It forged me. They'd pay for this, every last one of them. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. The house felt like a mausoleum when I returned, its walls echoing with the ghosts of a life I no longer recognized. I moved through it like a stranger, wearing the mask of a grieving son, a devoted husband. Elise bustled around, playing the widow's friend with practiced ease. Theo called to check in, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Beatrice sent flowers, a hollow gesture from a hollow woman. I nodded, smiled, answered their calls. But my eyes saw differently now. Every glance, every word they spoke, I dissected with a cold precision I hadn't known I possessed. The man they knew was slipping away, and something sharper was clawing its way out. I acted in silence, a predator stalking prey, too arrogant to sense danger. Late at night, I slipped into the kids' rooms, my hand steady as I plucked strands of hair from Jasper's pillow, Sadie's brush, Milo's stuffed bear. I sealed them in plastic, sent them to Vincent through a secure channel Apex had never traced. At home, I upgraded the security system, claiming it was for safety after Harold's death. Cameras hummed to life in the living room, the hallways, my bedroom. I watched the feeds on my laptop, a silent judge waiting for the guilty to reveal themselves. They didn't disappoint. The footage came fast and brutal. Elise and Theo tangled together on my couch, their laughter sharp and mocking. "He's still clueless," Theo chuckled, his hands roaming where mine once had. "We'll bleed him dry before he figures it out," Elise replied, her voice a blade twisting in my gut. They plotted in my bed, whispering about divorce, about carving up Apex for themselves. The disrespect burned, but the calculation froze me. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a heist, and I was the vault they cracked wide open. I saved every frame, every word, building a case they'd never see coming. The DNA results landed in my inbox days later, a clinical confirmation of the nightmare Harold had unleashed. Jasper carried Theo's blood. Sadie was Harold's spawn. Milo belonged to Margot's husband. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring not with tears, but with a rage so pure it felt like clarity. I called Elise downstairs that night, my voice calm as death. I laid it all out, the reports, the videos, the chat logs from Carver Legacy. Her face drained of color, eyes wide with panic. She stammered, then turned venomous. "Yes, it's true. You were never here, Mason. Harold saw me. How get man? You're the fool who didn't." Her words aimed to wound, but they bounced off the ice forming around my heart. "You're right," I said, my tone flat. "I didn't see you. Now I do." Confronting her head-on would have sparked a war lawyers. Lies, a public mess that might scar the kids worse than their parents already had. I chose a different path. I wrote a note, simple and final. "I know it all. Game over." I left it on the kitchen counter, a quiet promise of what was to come. Vincent stepped in then, his skills weaving a perfect exit. A car torched in a remote canyon. Traces of DNA, not mine, planted in the wreckage. A fabricated work trip to a volatile country. Mason Carver vanished, presumed dead. The news hit the family like a shockwave, their relief palpable even from a distance. They thought they'd won. That last night, I stood in the kids' doorways, my chest tight. Jasper slept with a book clutched to his chest. Sadie curled up with her sketches. Milo snored softly. I loved them still, despite the truth. But that love couldn't hold me here. Every glance at them would scream betrayal. I turned away, the darkness swallowing me as I left. The note was my last word, but not my last move. They'd built their empire on my back. I'd tear it down with my hands. The descent had begun. Alaska swallowed me whole, a frozen exile where I shed the skin of Mason Carver. The cabin stood alone, reachable only by seaplane, a fortress of solitude Vincent had secured through layers of untraceable ownership. I arrived broken, a man unmoored, but I didn't stay that way. The transformation was brutal. I chopped wood until my hands bled, ran through snow until my lungs burned, lifted weights until my muscles screamed. My body hardened, lean and unforgiving, a weapon forged in silence. I dyed my hair black, grew a beard, trained my voice to drop lower, erasing every trace of the soft executive they'd known. Inside, the fight was worse. Nights stretched endless, haunted by Jasper's quiet breathing, Sadie's sketches, Milo's small form. I drowned those ghosts in purpose, replaying Harold's smirk, Elise's venom, Theo's laughter. Mason begged to die. I let him. Vincent came when he could, his visits rare but vital. He brought forged papers, a new name, Gideon Holt. On paper, I'd been a security consultant, retired rich, now dabbling in investments. He watched me split logs one day, his breath fogging in the cold. "They wouldn't know you now," he said, his tone steady but edged with something heavy. I nodded, slamming the axe down. "Good." Mason was weak. "He's gone." Vincent didn't push, but his silence carried weight. He built Nexus Intelligence with me, a shadow empire trading in secrets. I exploited flaws I'd once patched at Apex, sold information to the highest bidders, corporations, governments, anyone with cash. Ethics blurred. The world's a machine, I told myself. They taught me that. Take or be taken. The wealth piled up, but it wasn't the goal. It was fuel for what came next. My network grew, a web of favors and fear. Judges owed me rulings. Cops turned blind eyes. Hackers dug where I pointed. Vincent ran the front, clean and polished, while I pulled strings from the dark. I tracked the Carvers, my gaze unrelenting. Apex crumbled without me. sold off cheap after clients fled. Elise moved in with Theo, their lavish life fading as his gambling drained what remained. Beatrice's stroke left her frail, a shadow of the puppet master she'd been. Margot's marriage splintered, then patched up out of desperation. I felt no triumph, only confirmation. They were fragile without me, a house of cards waiting for the wind. One night, Vincent arrived with news that pierced my armor. "Jasper's searching for you," he said, handing me printouts of online queries data trails, Apex records, my disappearance. "He's good. Keeps digging." My chest tightened. Part of me ached, a flicker of the father I'd been. I crushed it. "He's not mine," I snapped. "None of them are." But the spark lingered, a crack in the ice I'd built. Another jolt came later, sharper. A reporter, hired by a rival client, sniffed too close, linking a Nexus transaction to my old life. Vincent acted fast, bribing and misdirecting until the trail went cold. The scare sharpened me. I doubled my caution, my ruthlessness. No one would unmask me before I was ready. 10 years passed in that wilderness, a decade of remaking myself. Gideon Holt stood where Mason had fallen, a phoenix born from betrayal's ashes. I stared into the fire one night, the flames dancing like my plans. Denver called me back. The Carvers had no idea what waited. I'd vanished to survive, to grow strong. Now, I'd return to destroy. The reckoning wasn't a dream anymore. It was a promise, etched in every scar, every cold breath. I was ready. Denver greeted me like an old wound, raw and familiar. I settled into a penthouse high above the city, its windows framing the sprawl where my old life once stood. Gideon Holt had returned, a stranger in a tailored suit, watching the Carvers unravel through a lens of cold detachment. I saw Elise on her way to a dead-end job, her face lined with strain, her glamour long faded. Margot and her husband bickered outside a rundown apartment, their voices sharp with desperation. The house I'd built sat in someone else's hands, a monument to my erasure. I felt nothing but the steady pulse of purpose. They were falling, and I held the strings. My focus sharpened on the kids, now strangers bearing scars I hadn't seen grow. Jasper haunted the university library, a young man with my old drive but a shadow in his eyes. He hunted me online, his searches cutting closer to Nexus with every click financial trails, old Apex contracts, whispers of my vanishing. His mind mirrored mine, relentless and piercing. Sadie hid behind her art, posting sketches under a pseudonym. Her drawings twisted with pain, dark figures looming over broken homes, a silent cry I couldn't ignore. Milo spiraled, his teenage years a blur of arrests and hollow defiance. A boy lost to the chaos I'd left behind. I studied them like pieces on a board, each a weapon I could wield. Yet Jasper's persistence gnawed at me, a thread of something human I couldn't sever. Elisa's latest scheme reached me through my network. A memorial fundraiser, 10 years since my supposed death, a ploy to milk sympathy in cash. I saw the posters, her tearful face plastered across them. It was laughable, pathetic, perfect. Gideon Holt would step into their spotlight soon enough. Vincent prepped the groundwork, his hands steady, but his voice tight. "They've suffered enough, Gideon. The kids especially." I cut him off, my tone ice. "They chose this when they chose me as their fool." He didn't argue, but his eyes lingered, heavy with a judgment I refused to hear. He knew better than to push. I needed him focused. One afternoon, fate threw a curve. I sat in a campus coffee shop, reviewing Jasper's latest digital tracks when he walked in. He didn't know me, couldn't. I'd changed too much. Hair, voice, the way I carried myself. But when my book on cryptography slipped to the floor, he bent to grab it. Our hands brushed, and his gaze locked onto mine for a heartbeat. Recognition flickered, not of my face, but of something deeper. "Nice red," he muttered, handing it back. I nodded, my pulse steady despite the jolt. Keeps the mind sharp. He lingered, then left. I watched him go, my chest tight with a ghost of pride I buried fast. The pieces were aligning. The Carvers clung to their fraying threads, oblivious to the news tightening. Jasper's hunt, Sadie's silent screams. Milo's ruin, they echoed a past I'd burn away. Vincent's doubts stirred nothing in me. I stood at my window that night, the city lights glinting like a predator's eyes. The fundraiser loomed, my opening move. Satisfaction coiled inside me, cold and certain. I'd spent years crafting the shadow. Now it would fall across them all. The echoes of who I'd been fated. Only the reckoning remained. I stepped into their world as Gideon Holt, a phantom in a bespoke suit. My first move a calculated strike. Through proxy, I offered Elise a lifeline, a penthouse design contract worth millions, dangled before her like bait. She bit hard, her desperation palpable over the phone. We met at my place, high above Denver's pulse. She arrived early, her faded elegance patched together with a forced smile. I kept her waiting 7 minutes exactly, a petty echo of the time she'd once made me wait before our first date. When I emerged, I played the part, cool, commanding, a stranger she'd never suspect. "Mrs. Carver, good to meet you," I said, my handshake firm. A shadow crossed her eyes, not recognition, but a shiver she couldn't place. I savored it. The tour was a game of subtle knives. I described my vision, walnut paneling, abstract art, a reading nook by the window, details plucked from Mason's old dreams. She faltered, her pen trembling as she scribbled notes. "My late husband loved those too," she murmured, then shook it off, chasing the paycheck. I fed her hope, advancing funds to ease her debts, listening as she vented about Beatrice's care, the kids' struggles. She leaned into my feigned sympathy, blind to the trap. I owned her now, her gratitude a leash I'd tug when the time came. Every word she spoke, every sigh, I filed away, ammunition for the war she didn't see brewing. The memorial fundraiser arrived, a stage set for my next act. I entered late, a bouquet of lilies in hand, the scent heavy with irony. The venue sagged with faded grandeur, a mirror to their decline. Elise spotted me instantly, her face lighting up with relief. "Mr. Holt, you came," she gushed, guiding me through the sparse crowd. Beatrice sat in a wheelchair, her gaze piercing despite the haze of medication. Margot forced a smile, her husband reeking of cheap liquor. I played the gracious guest, my every move deliberate. Then Jasper approached, taller now, his handshake firm. "You seem familiar," he said, his voice edged with suspicion. I met his stare. "First time for everything," I replied, smooth as glass. His eyes lingered on my watch, a twin to Mason's old favorite. A seed planted. Sadie hovered near a wall of photos, her sketches tucked close, her quiet intensity cutting through the room's noise. Milo slouched by the exit, his defiance a brittle shell. I watched them all, their flaws laid bare. Elise pushed me toward Beatrice, her voice tight. "Mother, this is Mr. Holt, my new client." Beatrice's head tilted, her words slow. "Generous of you to join us. Mason would have appreciated it if he were here." Her tone probed, a test I deflected with a nod. "Tragic loss," I said, my face a mask. Inside, I cataloged her doubt, a wrinkle to iron out later. The finale came as the speeches wound down. I stepped forward, voice carrying over the murmurs. "I'd like to contribute to the kids' education fund," I announced, handing Elise a check that made her gasp. A gesture for a family hit hard. Her hands shook, gratitude spilling over. Jasper's stare burned into me, sharper now. As I turned to leave, I caught his ear one last time. "Keep digging, kid. Truth hides in plain sight." He froze, my words a match to his smoldering curiosity. Beatrice's eyes followed me out, narrowed and unyielding. I sat in my car afterward, the city's hum a distant roar. The mask had held, flawless and cruel. Elise saw a savior. Jasper saw a puzzle. Beatrice saw something she couldn't name. The game had shifted, my pieces sliding into place. Satisfaction curled inside me, a cold flame. I'd infiltrated their fragile hope, and soon I'd crush it. The past echoed faintly Sadie's drawings, Jasper's grip, but I silenced it. Gideon Holt didn't waver. The curtain was rising, and I held the strings. The penthouse became my war room, a perch where I tightened the noose. I summoned Elise for a meeting, my voice clipped as I laid out her design drafts. Her numbers didn't add up: padded costs, inflated fees, a desperate grab for more. "You've been sloppy," I said, sliding proof across the desk. Supplier receipts I dug up through Nexus. She blanched, her excuses stumbling over each other. "Industry standards," she started, but I cut her off. "Honesty's never been your strength, has it?" My tone dropped, a hint of Mason bleeding through. Her eyes widened, fear flickering. I leaned in, voice low. I know about the deal you had with Harold. With Theo after him. How you married a man you never wanted, birthed kids that weren't his. She bolted upright, clutching her bag. This is over, she hissed. I stood, my presence pinning her back. Sit. We're done when I say we are. I played a recording then, Beatrice's voice crackling from Aspen Grove, where my people had coaxed her confession. Mason never knew. Harold set the rules. He earned, we took. Elisa's hands shook, her world shrinking with every word. Sign this, I said, pushing a contract across. It handed her business to me, profits rerouted to my accounts. She resisted, spitting blackmail, but I held firm. Sign, or tomorrow every carver gets this tape, plus Milo's rap sheet courtesy of my friends in blue. Her pen scratched the paper, hatred blazing in her eyes. I'd broken her, but the real blow waited. Jasper became my next move. I'd fed him crumbs, anonymized audio of Harold and Theo scheming, financial leaks from Apex's collapse. He pieced them together, his mind a blade cutting through their lies. He tracked me down, cornering me at a diner near his campus. His face was haggard, eyes fierce. Who are you? Why show me this? I stayed calm, sliding DNA results across the table. I knew Mason Carver. I know what they did. You're Theo's, not his. Sadie's Harold's. Milo's for Margot's husband. He sank back, breath ragged. My whole life's a lie, he muttered. I pressed on. They all knew. Beatrice, Margot, everyone. They used him. His fists clenched, a storm brewing. Tell me everything, he demanded. I nodded. Soon. Beatrice's birthday at the care home was the stage for the end. The family gathered, brittle and strained. Elise fidgeted, her defeat still fresh. Margot snapped at her husband, their truce fraying. Sadie clutched her sketchbook, Milo absent, locked up after a botched theft I'd nudged along. Jasper arrived with me, his jaw set. I carried roses, a mocking gift, and greeted Beatrice with a smile. Happy birthday, Mrs. Carver. Her gaze lingered, sharp despite her frailty. The room buzzed with unease as I mingled, my words laced with barbs only Elise caught. Then it hit. Phones chimed in unison. Staff handed out envelopes, my evidence unleashed. Photos, recordings, DNA, their sins laid bare. Chaos erupted. Beatrice dropped her papers, hands trembling. What is this? She croaked. Justice, I said, stepping forward. Elise whispered my name, dread dawning. I shed Gideon's mask, my voice pure Mason. I'm back. Margot gasped. Her husband froze. Sadie's tears fell, her voice breaking. The shadow of my drawings, it's you. The room spun with their shock. Jasper moved beside me, his choice clear. This is my father, he said, steady despite the quake in his eyes. The one you all betrayed. Elise crumpled, Beatrice wheezed, Margot sobbed. I towered over them, unyielding. They stared, shattered as I spoke. You stole my life, my trust, my kids. Now you lose yours. I walked out, Jasper at my side, the air thick with their ruin. Outside, he turned to me, voice low. Is this it? I paused, the weight settling. The truth's out. The rest falls on its own. Inside, I felt no joy, only a hollow triumph. Sadie's words echoed, a knife in my chest. The curtain had fallen, but the stage was ashes. My war was won, yet the cost lingered. The care home dissolved into chaos as I walked away, Jasper's steps echoing mine. Elisa's collapse hit the floor with a thud. Beatrice's gasps pierced the air. Margot's cries clawed at the silence. Vincent had primed the press, and by morning, headlines screamed their shame across Denver. Photos of tear-streaked faces, leaked recordings, damning documents, my handiwork laid bare for the world. The fallout was swift, an avalanche I'd sculpted over a decade. Banks seized their last accounts, my lawsuits reclaiming every cent they'd stolen. The house went to auction, their belongings scattered like leaves in a storm. I watched from my penthouse, the city's lights flickering below, a graveyard of their dreams. Elise faded into squalor, a ghost haunting cheap rentals, shunned by the society she'd once charmed. Beatrice lingered in a state-run home, her sharp mind dulled by neglect, her final days a quiet penance. Margot and her husband split for good, their patched-up life too fragile to hold. I felt no warmth in their ruin, only a sterile satisfaction, a ledger balanced in blood and ink. The kids bore the weight differently. Jasper stood apart, his graduation a quiet triumph I tracked from afar. He turned down Nexus, forging his own path, a shadow of my old fire in his stride. I respected that, though we rarely spoke, our bond a thread stretched thin by truth. Sadie found refuge in art school, her talent blooming through a fund I'd buried under aliases. Her sketches arrived sometimes, unaddressed, slipped in my mailbox a lone figure in light now, not shadow. I kept them, never replying, a silent tether to the girl I'd raised. Milo faced the law, his sentence harsh but fair. Inside, he shifted, joining programs, writing letters I read but left unanswered. Vincent funneled him small aid legal fees, a book or two my last concession to the boy he'd been. Their futures hung on their choices now, a freedom I hadn't had. One night, I stood on my balcony, the wind biting my face. The victory tasted like ash. I'd won, stripped them bare, but the hole inside me gaped wider. Mason was gone, Gideon a shell. I'd become a hybrid, forged in pain, driven by vengeance, yet tethered to echoes I couldn't shake. Sadie's drawings, Jasper's resolve, they pierced me, reminders of a love I'd buried. I decided then. Nexus sold in a quiet deal, its profits split between my solitude and a trust one named Sadie and Milo. Jasper would oversee it someday, when he was ready. It was Mason's final act, a flicker of mercy Gideon couldn't fully snuff out. Weeks later, a package arrived, no sender, just a small canvas. Sadie's work? Unmistakable. A man stood alone, his back to a burning house, embers drifting upward. Me. My throat tightened, a crack in the ice I'd built. I hung it in my study, staring at it nightly, her vision of me both truth and wound. Milo's letter came the same day, scribbled from his cell. I'm trying to be better. Thanks, whoever you are. I burned it, the smoke curling like my fading resolve. The carvers were ashes now, but I remained a sentinel of their ruin. I retreated from Denver after that, a cabin by a lake my new refuge. The silence suited me, a mirror to the emptiness I carried. Vengeance had reclaimed what they'd taken, my pride, my justice, but peace stayed out of reach. I'd paid a price, losing myself to win. The kids might rise from this. Jasper carving a legacy, Sadie painting hers, Milo clawing back. I'd watch, distant, a ghost they'd never fully know. The embers cooled, but the scars stayed hot. This tale ends here, folks. My wars. Done. Its echoes yours to ponder. Share your thoughts below. Did this hit you hard or surprise you? If it gripped you, hit that like, subscribe, and join me next time. Thanks for listening. Until then, take care.